right, let's see. Deuteronomy 24, how we are to help the poor. The commentary accompanying Deuteronomy 15 examined God's directives about who should care for the poor. In this chapter, God gives instructions about the different facet of care for the poor. He told the people, "When you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all your work of your hands. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the burrows again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not go over it again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow." Deuteronomy 24:19 through 21, verse given in Leviticus 19:9 through 10 and 23:22. "And any grain left in the field, any olives on the trees, or grapes on the vines, were to be for the poor. And God also made other provisions for the poor, commanding, But on the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, so that the needy of your people may eat, and whatever they leave the beast of the field may eat. You are to do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove." Exodus 23:11. God had already required that man must have a Sabbath, a seventh day that he took off for the purpose of rest, but now he required that the land also have a Sabbath, that anything that grew on the land in that year was for the poor. In each of these many ways God had made provision for the poor, but notice that the poor always had to do the work for themselves to collect those provisions made available to them. That is, the harvesters left the sheaves and rounded off the corners of the field while harvesting. But if the poor were to have that food, they had to carry out the extra sheaves and harvest the corners for themselves. Similarly, the poor had to pick the remaining clusters off the vines and collect the grapes that fell in the vineyard, and they had to gather the remaining olives off the trees. And everything that grew on any property in the Sabbath year had to be harvested by the poor if they were to partake of its food. God made opportunities for the poor, but work was always required in exchange. After all, the Bible commands, if anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. Of course, the exception to this was orphans, widows, and the disabled who were truly unable to work. If they were physically unable to supply for themselves, charity was provided for them. The biblical policy is what was adopted in America. In fact, when Benjamin Franklin was in London, he wrote a newspaper piece criticizing the English practice of providing for the poor by taxing citizens, both directly taxing their incomes and also indirectly taxing commodities sold and bought by them. Franklin rebuked them for that approach, explaining, "I am for doing good to the poor, but I defer in opinion of the means. I think the best way of doing good to the poor is not making them easy in poverty, but leading or driving them out of it. In my youth, I traveled much, and I observed in different countries that the more public provisions were made for the poor, the less they provided for themselves, and of course became poorer. And on the contrary, the less was done for them, the more they did for themselves and became richer. There is no country in the world where so many provisions are established for them, so many hospitals to receive them when they are sick or lame, founded and maintained by voluntary charities, so many almshouses for the aged of both sexes, together with a solemn general law made by the rich to subject their estates to the heavy tax for the support of the poor. Under all these obligations are our poor modest, humble, and thankful? And do they use their best endeavors to maintain themselves and lighten our shoulders of this burden? On the contrary, I affirm that there is no country in the world in which the poor are more idle, desolate, drunken, and insolent. The day you passed that act, you took away from them before their eyes the greatest of all inducements to industry, frugality, and sobriety. In short, you offered a premium for the encouragement of idleness, and you should not now wonder that it has had its effect in the increase of poverty. Repeal that law, and you will soon see a change in their manners. Saint Monday and Saint Tuesday will cease to be holidays. 6 days shalt thou labor. Exodus 29. The one of the old commandments, long treated as out of date, will again be looked upon as a respectable precept. Industry will increase, and with it plenty among the lower people. Their circumstances will mend, and more will be done for their happiness by enabling them to provide for themselves than could be done by dividing all your estates among them. Franklin listed several bad fruits that resulted when the biblical method of caring for the poor was not followed: an increase of poverty, ungratefulness, laziness, higher taxes with no resulting benefits, etc. The founding fathers were very concerned about helping the poor, but they were equally concerned about doing it in a biblical manner. As noted earlier in the commentary accompanying Deuteronomy 15, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were both very generous with their personal charity, and both were leaders in organizing the community to care for the poor. But both were also insistent that whatever the poor receive must not encourage laziness or idleness. As Jefferson observed, an industrious farmer occupies a more dignified place in the scale of beings, whether moral or political, than a lazy lounger, valuing himself on his family, too proud to work, and drawing out a miserable existence by eating on that surplus of other men's labor. And when Washington had given instructions to his business manager at Mount Vernon, he told them, "Let the hospitality of the house, with the respect to the poor, be kept up. Let no one go hungry away. If any of this kind of people should be in want of corn, supply their necessities, provided it does not encourage them in idleness." God definitely cares for the poor, and he tells us to do the same. But he also established clear principles for how that assistance is to occur, and it requires some type of effort from the poor. That's it.